Imagine spending 15 years cleaning an office, completely invisible to the people around you, ignored, underestimated, treated like nothing. Now imagine, after all that time, walking into the same office and revealing that you actually own the company. Sounds impossible, right? Well, that's exactly what I did. For over a decade, I watched from the shadows as Victor Lang, the arrogant CEO of Pinnacle Enterprises, ran the company like his personal empire. He was ruthless, corrupt, and worst of all, he thought he was untouchable. He mocked me, humiliated me in front of his executives, never once realizing the truth. Because what Victor didn't know was that I wasn't just the cleaning lady. I was the majority shareholder, and I had spent years gathering the evidence I needed to take him down. This is the story of how I turned the tables on a man who thought he ruled the world, how I exposed his fraud, destroyed his career, and transformed Pinnacle Enterprises into something he never could. If you love stories of karma, power shifts, and unexpected revenge, you need to hear this. And trust me, this ending, you won't see it coming. For 15 years, I walked through those corporate hallways, invisible to everyone around me. Executives in expensive suits barely acknowledged my existence, treating me as just another part of the office furniture. I was Clara Thompson, the cleaning lady, silent, unnoticed, irrelevant in their eyes. But what they didn't know was that I saw everything. I heard everything. And I was patient. My job at Pinnacle Enterprises was simple. Keep the office spotless, pick up after men too entitled to throw their own trash away, and pretend not to exist. I had perfected the art of blending into the background, an unspoken rule for people like me. The higher-ups, especially Victor Lang, the arrogant, self-obsessed CEO, never bothered to learn my name. I was just her, or the janitor. But that was fine. It gave me the perfect cover. Victor was the worst of them all. He strutted through the office like a king, barking orders, mocking employees, and making sure everyone knew who was in charge. And me? I was the easiest target. He ridiculed me in front of his colleagues, making cruel jokes about my lowly job, laughing as if my dignity were just another thing he could toss into the trash. But what Victor didn't realize was that the nobody he loved humiliating wasn't as powerless as he thought. Because, while he was busy lining his pockets with company money and crushing anyone in his way, I was watching and waiting. You see, Pinnacle Enterprises wasn't just my workplace, it was my inheritance, a secret Victor never saw coming. And the day would come when I would wipe the smirk off his face for good. What no one at Pinnacle Enterprises knew, what Victor Lang never even suspected, was that I owned more of the company than he did. Years ago, my uncle, a brilliant but eccentric businessman, had left me his majority shares in the firm. At the time, I had no idea what to do with them. I was just a cleaner, not a corporate shark. So I kept my head down, did my job, and let Victor believe he ruled the kingdom. But as the years passed, I started paying attention. The office was my hunting ground, and my prey, men like Victor, left trails of their corruption scattered everywhere. I watched as he cut salaries while giving himself massive bonuses. I overheard meetings where he manipulated numbers, deceiving both investors and employees. I found documents carelessly tossed into trash bins, revealing frauds so deep they could ruin him if exposed. So I started collecting. Every shredded report pieced back together, every whispered conversation replayed in my mind. I became an invisible archivist, a shadow recording his every misstep. And the more I gathered, the clearer it became. Victor Lang was a thief, a liar, and a man whose arrogance had blinded him to the storm forming right under his nose. I could have revealed the truth at any moment. One email, one leak to the press, and he'd be finished. But no, that wasn't enough. I didn't just want him fired. I wanted him ruined. I wanted him to feel as powerless as he made others feel. And when he humiliated me publicly, laughing at my expense in front of his executives, he unknowingly signed his own downfall. Because that night, I made a call. It was time to end this game. The humiliation still burned in my mind. That night, after Victor's public mockery, I sat in my tiny apartment with a decision to make. I had spent years collecting evidence, but now it was time to act. No more waiting. No more patience. He had given me the perfect reason to bring him down, and I was going to make sure it was spectacular. I reached for my phone and dialed the one person I knew could help, Tom Spencer, an old friend and one of the sharpest corporate lawyers in the city. He had seen men like Victor before, greedy, untouchable, convinced they were above the rules. But Tom also knew something Victor didn't. I was the majority shareholder, and once I stepped forward, he wouldn't be able to stop what was coming. We spent the next few weeks meticulously building the case. Fraudulent deals, illegal layoffs, financial mismanagement, it was all there, hidden in the very company he claimed to run so brilliantly. Every document, every bank transaction, every testimony from employees too afraid to speak out before, it all formed an airtight case. And the best part? Victor A. had no clue. With the evidence secured, I planned my next move. The annual shareholder meeting was approaching, a gathering where the company's biggest players would be present, unaware that their invisible janitor was about to rewrite history. But I wasn't going in as Clara, the cleaner. No, I would walk in as Clara Thompson, majority owner of Pinnacle Enterprises. And when I revealed the truth, I wanted to see the exact moment when Victor Lang realized he was finished. The day of the shareholder meeting had arrived. As I walked into Pinnacle Enterprises, dressed in my usual janitor's uniform, no one paid me any attention, just as they hadn't for the past 15 years. The executives brushed past me, deep in conversation about their million-dollar deals, oblivious to the fact that in just a few minutes their world was about to shift. I stepped into the grand conference room where the meeting was already underway. Victor Lang sat at the head of the table, his usual smugness on full display as he talked about his company's future. He had no idea, no clue that today would be the last time he'd ever hold that position. I didn't wait for an invitation. I walked straight to the front of the room, dropping my mop and bucket with a loud clang, enough to make every executive turn toward me with a mix of confusion and disdain. Victor's lips curled into an amused smirk. "What the hell is this?" he sneered. "Are we seriously letting the help interrupt a shareholder meeting?" I met his gaze, unflinching. Then I pulled out my stack of documents and dropped them on the table. The weight of the evidence was nothing compared to what I was about to say. "I'm not interrupting," I said, my voice steady. "I'm taking my seat." The room fell silent. Confused murmurs filled the space. Victor let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "You?" he scoffed. "You think you have a seat at this table?" I let the moment linger, savoring his arrogance one last time before dismantling it. "I don't think I have a seat, Victor. I own this table. I'm the majority shareholder of Pinnacle Enterprises." The color drained from his face. His smirk twitched, faltering. He turned to the other board members, expecting someone to refute me. No one did. Instead, Tom, my lawyer, stood up and calmly distributed copies of the documents proving my claim. Victor's fingers gripped the arms of his chair as he scanned the papers, his expression morphing from disbelief to panic. This is a joke," he stammered. "No, Victor," I said, leaning in just enough for everyone to hear. "The joke was thinking you could steal from this company and never face the consequences." Then, with every eye in the room locked on him, I dropped the final bombshell. The proof of his fraud, his illegal deals, his embezzlement, all laid out in black and white for the board to see. And for the first time in his life, Victor Lang was speechless. Victor Lang had built his empire on intimidation, deception, and sheer arrogance. But in that moment, as he flipped through the damning evidence with trembling fingers, all of it, the power, the control, the illusion of invincibility, began to crumble. The board members weren't fools. They had tolerated Victor's greed for years, but now, faced with undeniable proof of financial fraud, they turned on him like vultures sensing a dying animal. Murmurs of concern shifted into open outrage. Some whispered about legal implications, others about the PR disaster this would cause. But one thing was clear. Victor was finished. "You can't do this," he spat, slamming his fist on the table, his voice laced with desperation. "You think the board is just going to hand everything over to a janitor? I smiled, taking my time before responding. I think they're going to do whatever protects their money, Victor. And right now, keeping you around is the worst investment they could make. Then, one by one, the votes came in. A unanimous decision. Effective immediately, Victor. Lang was removed as CEO of Pinnacle Enterprises. Security was called to escort him out. And as the guards approached, he snapped, lunging across the table toward me. "You think this is over?" he hissed. "You think you've won?" I didn't flinch. I didn't need to. Because the moment he was dragged out of that room, his entire world collapsed. Within hours, the news broke. Headlines exposed his crimes to the public. Investigators froze his assets. Investors pulled out. Lawsuits followed. And the once mighty Victor Lang, who had spent years treating people like pawns in his game, found himself powerless, disgraced, and utterly alone. And me? For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't invisible anymore. With Victor Lang gone, the air inside Pinnacle Enterprises felt different, lighter, freer. It was as if the entire company had been holding its breath under his rule, and now, finally, it could exhale. But I didn't have time to enjoy the moment. There was still work to be done. Stepping into the CEO's office for the first time felt surreal. The same space where Victor had once humiliated employees, made ruthless decisions, and hoarded power. Now it belonged to me. And unlike him, I wasn't here to serve myself. I was here to rebuild. The first change I made was to the employees who had been mistreated for years. I called an emergency staff meeting, something Victor had never bothered to do. When I walked into the room, faces filled with shock and curiosity turned toward me. I saw disbelief in their eyes, but also something else, hope. "I know what you're all thinking," I said, scanning the room. "How did the cleaning lady end up running the company?" A few uneasy chuckles rippled through the crowd. "But I've been here just as long as most of you. I've seen what goes on behind closed doors, and I know how hard you work, how hard we work. So starting today, things change." Raises were issued. Fair promotions were reinstated. The toxic work environment Victor had created, dismantled. For the first time in years, employees weren't afraid to speak up, and in return, they gave Pinnacle Enterprises something Victor had never managed to earn: loyalty. As the days turned into weeks, word spread about the woman who went from cleaning offices to leading a corporation. Some called it the greatest revenge story in business history. Others called it justice. But to me, it was just the beginning. I should have known Victor wouldn't go down quietly. A man like him, one who thrived on control and manipulation, was never going to accept defeat. And just as I was settling into my new role, just as Pinnacle Enterprises was beginning to heal from his corruption, he made his move. It started with a lawsuit, a desperate attempt to claim I had somehow stolen the company from him. The irony was almost laughable. Victor, the man who built his career on deception, now crying foul because the game didn't go his way. But I wasn't laughing, because I knew men like Victor didn't rely on fairness. They relied on loopholes, connections, and intimidation. His legal team was ruthless. They twisted the narrative, trying to paint me as an opportunist who had manipulated my way to power. They dug into my past, my finances, even my personal life, searching for anything they could use against me. For weeks, it felt like I was fighting a battle on two fronts, leading a company by day, defending my name by night. But here's what Victor didn't understand. He had money, but I had truth. And in the end, truth won. The lawsuit was thrown out before it even reached trial. The judge saw through his desperation, his lies unraveling just like his career. And just like that, Victor Lang, the once feared CEO of Pinnacle Enterprises, became nothing more than a footnote in corporate history. No allies, no money, no way back. As for me, I had no time to celebrate. There was still one final chapter to write. 1 year later, Pinnacle Enterprises was unrecognizable, in the best way possible. The dark cloud Victor Lang had cast over the company was gone, replaced by something he never could have built: trust. Under my leadership, salaries increased, work conditions improved, and employees actually wanted to come to work. I made sure the company's focus wasn't just on profit, but on people, something Victor had always ignored. And you know what happened? Productivity soared. Employee retention skyrocketed. Investors who once feared for the company's future now saw it thriving. People still whispered about my story. The janitor who became CEO, the woman who took down the untouchable. Some called it luck, others called it fate. But I knew the truth. It wasn't luck that made me stay invisible for 15 years, quietly gathering every scrap of evidence I needed. It wasn't fate that gave me the patience to wait for the perfect moment to strike. It was strategy. It was resilience. It was knowing that the best revenge isn't just proving someone wrong. It's proving yourself right. As I stood in my office one evening, looking out over the city, I thought about Victor Lang, about how he had underestimated me, about how he was nothing more than a bitter ghost now, while I was here, leading, building, thriving. And I realized something. I didn't just take my seat at the table. I built a whole new one. So, after everything, after years of being ignored, after watching Victor Lang run Pinnacle Enterprises into the ground, after patiently gathering every piece of evidence, I proved that even the most invisible person can hold the most power. But now, I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my place? Would you have taken action sooner, or would you have waited for the perfect moment, just like I did? Drop a comment below. I want to know what you think. And if you love stories like this, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because trust me, this isn't the only tale of unexpected revenge and shocking power shifts we've got. Oh, and if you think this was wild, wait until you hear what happened in our next story. Click here to watch. It's one you won't want to miss.